Welcome to Ulua. You live, you work, you art.
Hello, this episode will be about language, specifically about words. Different languages, words in general. And there is this concept, which is also the name of this episode, Falsos amigos in Portuguese and falsos amigos in Spanish. It could be translated literally into fake friends in English. But they don't mean exactly that. So these words can already deceive you. If you use them like falsos amigos, you could use that in a context where you're talking about friends that are not really friends. But what I mean here, and some of the meanings of these two words, is like words that are in Spanish, sometimes pronounced the same and sometimes written the same than in Portuguese. For example, we have criança, which is a kid in Portuguese, and we have criança, which is upbringing in Spanish. And even if you don't care about the languages, just bear a little with me because I think it's important in order to understand how languages work and how we make mistakes a lot of the times, even in our own languages. So yes, and there are these kind of words that are pronounced the same or written the same in the two languages, but they have totally different meanings. And this is an error that we have a lot, an error that we commit a lot in Argentina and also in Brazil when we meet with people from Portuguese. And I will talk about Brazilian Portuguese because it's the most relatable to us as Argentinians, I mean. And this is something that you can see frequently happening, this misunderstanding of words. So they are talking about something completely different and we just mistake things. So there is one word that could be applied in this concept of falsos amigos, or ways to interpret this differently from, even though they are written in the same way in the three languages, they mean different things in each one. So, for example, persona in Spanish, my native language, it means just you and me, an individual. And regardless the genre or whatever, it's just an individual, a human being. And in Portuguese, persona is not the same because they have the word pessoa for the individual. And we were talking about this when I interviewed Sergio Sank, who is Brazilian, and he's also worked with masks and those kind of things. He mentioned this very same word, and I also at the time thought, oh, this could be applicable to English. And so in Portuguese, persona means it's not exactly a character because we were talking about the differences, and persona could be like a character but without the psychological part of the character. When you are an actor and an actress and want to interpret this character, you have to think and act and put yourself into the skin of this person, the one you are trying to interpret. And he has or she has some psychological background in order for you to build this character. However, persona in Portuguese doesn't have this psychological background. Only it's the look, we could say. Just it's not exactly a mask, but it's just like the look of the character without all her background. However, in English, persona, the word persona as in Spanish and in Portuguese, means that character with all the psychological background and baggage. So you can see one single word written exactly the same and pronounced exactly the same is totally different in the meaning, and I mean the real meaning of the word in the different languages. So imagine that you are talking to somebody and in any of these languages and they use the word persona, and you won't actually understand the same that they're trying to say or convey if they are not using other things. Because you have an idea. For example, if you say persona, my first idea of persona is the one in my native language. And the same will happen to you. So when we are talking, we just give it automatically assigned this idea, this concept to the concept that we have about persona, right? And that's just a simple curiosity of the language. But why do I bring this discussion about these falsos amigos or these fake friends? Because of that, that I was mentioning, that the things that we have associated in our minds with one word. So on one side we say, oh, talking and having the right words in order to say something, it's really, really important because people may have some misunderstanding of what you are saying. You have to use the right words and to be super clear on what you're trying to say. But at the same time, I think the other person will understand, even though you can make the most of the effort from your side and really be a great communicator, the other person will interpret on their own lenses these things, right? With their own baggage, with their own background and past experiences. And on the other hand, I can be a terrible communicator, and the other person will, even they can be good listeners and everything, but they will have, they could have a different picture from the one you are trying to impress or to show them. So it's like this communication where it's no doubt, I think, why, even though I always kind of complain about that, because I say whenever I go for a gig, for example, at a company, and I have to work out some problem that they have, the first thing everybody says is, we have a communication problem. And that's true, yes, and I can understand that because of this that we are talking about. And at the same time, this communication can be translated or the word could be like unraveled, because you start unraveling this idea of bad communication into really understanding what's going on. And it's not just communication at a surface level, but you have to go underground and dig like 3 or more levels to really understand what's going on. Anyways, just for you to understand and have certain idea of what I'm trying to talk about. And another thing that I want to talk to you about today is because why I'm talking in this such an the exact word could be like, I don't know if superficial, but it's super simple language that I always use. And that is something I have had doubts with from a long time ago, because at first when I was a young kid and adolescent, I used to use complicated words and every time I did that, people would totally disconnect because they say, oh, you're trying to brag that you know so many words and you speak like that, and what are you trying to say? You are like bragging, or those kind of things. And maybe I was, I don't know. But every time I learn a new word, I used to go for it and use it. And so there came a time when I met this quote. I don't know if it was said by Einstein, but it said that when you know something, you should try to explain it to your grandma or to an older person in simple words, and that means that you really, really get these ideas or these concepts or this thing that you're trying to say. And it took me a lot of effort to come to that, to like speaking in a Eli 5 kind of way, just like talking to children, we could say. And I don't mean that disrespectfully or in a pejorative way, but I mean that as a way of making things or making thinking, we could say, I don't know, available to everyone. And to a certain extent, this is also related to words. You will see how it all goes, I hope. So it took me a lot of effort in moving, like speaking like I'm talking to in simple words. And sometimes I feel that I have overdone that. I'm not sure. You can say in the comments, no, you're talking like in super simple words and you should be more like, I don't know, explain more about how things work. I don't know. And I know that is something that is going on in many channels right now. Like, for example, and I think that's great, of course. For example, I don't know, your brain is thinking like this, and this cell is activated, and the other is shut down. They have done that also sometimes. But I think we are getting lost in words a lot and not doing the real work of the action part and the thinking part and the rationality part. And maybe I'm just talking to the people that are not in that, because I know also there's extreme or absolutely rationalizing, everything that's going on. And that is not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about people who are not getting into the deeper meaning of things. And I know if you're here, you might not be the kind of person. Otherwise, I don't think you will be here. Would be here. Anyways, maybe I said too much, but that's about Eli 5. This movement that started, and I think we have it started like at least 10 years ago, maybe a little more, when we were trying to get things super easy for everyone. And I think we have overdone that. That's my opinion. I think we have gone too far on explaining things super simple, and I still am doing this. As I say here, I'm oversimplifying things, and that has also some kind of meaning for me right now. So again, what I'm trying to say is, I think it's okay to speak like in Eli 5 way of saying things, because we have now, as a society, we could say everyone or most people in the world have gone to this side of speaking like we are 5 years old, like children, and we are using super simple words, and we are missing out so many deep meaning words. Now we have to start going to the opposite way. And at the same time, we have to start where we are now. So we are in this environment, oversimplifying things. And I think it is a good start to start like that, to start like talking as if everything was simple. Because I think it is still needed, though it's needed to move a little bit more forward, backwards, I would say, towards the more academic way of thinking, because everything is balance. You cannot be too weighing onto the practical things. That's what we want right now, right? Yeah, so I think we have to start going backwards a little bit, because today I found a video that it said like you can learn this thing in 5 minutes, and I was talking to my partner and say, hey, there's something that you can learn it in 5 minutes, which has been an ancient tradition that you have to learn in like years. And he said, no, I don't want that. I want it explained in 30 seconds. And we had a laugh because, everything now has to be even quicker and quicker and quicker and quicker. So even though we are using like super simplified language, it's apparently still not enough. It should be more simple even. And I don't think that's the way, at least not want to go. I don't know about you, but if you want to develop, because language is super related to thinking and to our internal growth and development. So we need to have a balance. We need to be able, once we understand something, to explain it like in this super easy language. But we also should go a little bit deeper and understand it in the abstract way of thinking, or the abstract way of connecting things in our brain. Otherwise, our brains are dying. And it is also funny because the other day I was looking at the comments of a video where they talked about this philosopher. I think I have mentioned before, Byung-Chul Han, who is from Korea. And the person was connecting things and explaining why Byung-Chul Han said this and that and that kind of thing. And at the end, there was a comment saying, but how can you make it practical? And I mean, that's the opposite of what you want when you are trying to think or you're trying to connect dots from different areas of your life or from different models, different patterns, different like a philosopher. You want to think of as a philosopher, you want to get deep into the context that's going on, into the history, the background, what we should think in order to move forward with this topic. And there lies no practical thing. It's super abstract. So some things have to be abstract, and that is the way that we should start to think about in a more abstract way. And yes, maybe I have moved sideways from the words themselves. But coming back to that, for example, when you read a poem, and I had an interview also with Eleonora Diez Posterivo the other day, and she's a poet, and she's, well, many things, but she's also a poet. And we were talking about poems and how I said poems for me are like a question, right? And when you have a poem, you don't just write things and put a comma and then move on to the next sentence and put a comma, and then it's just like if you were writing code. Not at all. You're trying to give, or that could be your very first draft of a poem, but then you will refine it and try to give it some musicality and try to give it more like rhythm. And there are also patterns to work on a poem, which I have learned like 10 years ago, not that much either. So there are so many things, and when you use, for example, a word in a poem, you are not implying the literal word. You are constructing a metaphor, or you're trying to express something that is beyond words. And this is abstract, this is abstraction, and we need more of that. We need more of forgetting about the literal meaning of the words, as I see right now mostly. Maybe it's not your case, but I see it all the time. And so again, words are important. We also talked about this with Agustin. And this could be like a publicity or an advertisement for the past episodes that I did with other people, but we have talked about this also. Words are super important. They do have meaning. They have to be taken carefully, but not to the point where they leave us speechless, or they saturate our minds with so many words and things that we cannot really think and connect things that we want to learn about, right? And I know I'm making here like this is like I told you, this is not exactly like an essay. This is me just winging it on this exercise, on this premise or prompt of saying, okay, what are words for you? And about falsos amigos, as we said. So words, yes, they do have amazing meaning. They are great. We can say almost anything with words, except when we can't. Because there are some things that can be said with words. And now it comes to mind an ad that there was on TV here in Argentina. I think it was in the 90s or 2000s, something like that. And there was a guy, and it was for the Father's Day. I think it was an ad for telecommunications here. And there was a guy saying, my dad, with just one look, he told me the theory of relativity. And you could see he was talking. He said, my father taught me, with just one look, he told me the theory of relativity. And you could say an image of the man, an old man saying nothing, and just like nodding like this. And then the guy says, my father, with one look, he told me, go to the neighbors and ask for a cup of coffee. And you could see again the guy, the old man saying that, nodding, just nodding. And so everything was like that. So sometimes words, what I mean is sometimes words are meaningless. They are super important, and at the same time they aren't. It's like this dichotomy of life that we have in almost everything. And if you've been following the channel, you know there's always this like two-sided world. So words do have meaning and they don't. This duality is present everywhere. But the point is finding the balance. To what extent should I follow my words and be the most specific, and maybe even there are people that invent words because they don't find that the right word to say specific thing, and they have another new meaning and those kind of things. And on the other hand, sometimes words are not enough. Again, in a poem, you would have these huge metaphors of things, and also it could happen when you see a painting. There are paintings that can have so many readings depending on who sees that. The same happens with words. somebody's shouting a goal. I don't know if you can hear that, but anyways. So I think misunderstandings will keep on happening, and I will be selfish here. That is a good thing because that is what I work on mostly. No, I'm just kidding. But yeah, misunderstandings will keep on happening because we are human and we have different views of the world, and we have different languages, and we are too used to some language, even it is our native or our second language or third language. We will make mistakes in their definitions because we don't have the definitions present all the time. And you can see that happens when we talk in the one of the first episode about second language, second you. We talk about that and how having a knowledge of other languages can totally modify your way of thinking. For example, I know that this language Greek has also like the Arabic and also like Hebrew. It has another person too. So you have like in English you have she, he, it, and in Spanish you have yo, tú, él, and in Portuguese you have I have already forgotten. Okay, but you get the idea. And so you have these personas, these names, also numbers, which you can conjugate in the dual, singular, or plural forms. For example, in Arabic, mostly all the Semitic languages have this dual thing. So they have a thing for two people or two things. And I was thinking the other day, and I know I'm going somewhere, but I will be closing with this. Sorry. I was thinking about this because when we receive, for example, the knowledge from the Greeks, we think that we receive that from the Greeks and the translation, but everything is lost in the middle because the Greeks were conquered by the Romans and the Egyptians and then the Arabic people. So we have like the translation of the translation of the translation into English, and sometimes from English into Spanish or into other languages. So it's like, imagine that there are things that are completely lost there. So yes, words have meanings except what they don't. That would be my final saying. Anyways, like almost any other episode that we are doing here, I'm doing here, talking to you, I think it brings more questions than answers, I hope, because if you have questions, you can have this thing going on in your head and wanting to know more. You can ignite your curiosity. So I hope this serves you well, and please comment if I had made any mistake or anything that you want to mention here. Everything is welcome, and see you in the next episode. Bye bye. Parole, 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 tan solo parole.
Stay tuned for Ulua's next episode.